Have you ever had that moment where you were grinding at work, chasing bills, chasing status, and then like a lightning bolt, it hits you? Is this really what life's about?
It's like you're stuck on autopilot, doing all the right things, but deep down you're wondering who decided this is the way life should be.
And that's what we're diving into today. How the journey to financial independence connects with David Foster Wallace's famous speech, This is Water.
Because here's the thing, most of us swim in invisible currents. We chase promotions, we get bigger houses, nicer cars, without ever asking if those choices line up with what we actually value in life.
And that's the most dangerous thing. If you don't wake up to it, money can end up controlling you instead of freeing you. Financial independence isn't just about the math. It's about learning to see the water you're in and choosing your own meaning of it.
So today, we're going to unpack Wallace's wisdom and show how it applies to money, some practical steps to break free from default settings and stop worshiping stuff, and also build a life where you actually are in control.
If you've ever felt trapped by the 9 to 5 treadmill or caught in an endless spending cycle, this conversation is for you. Stick with us because by the end, you'll have a framework to live and spend with intention.
And maybe, finally, you'll be able to see the water you're already in.
On May 21st, 2005, David Foster Wallace stepped on stage at Kenyon College to deliver one of the most famous commencement ceremony speeches ever, titled This is Water. It's been one of my favorite speeches I've ever heard. And today we're bringing it to the Fi Guys to discuss it and to see how we can use some of the lessons that he tried to teach everyone in that speech to financial independence and our journey on it. Dominic, I don't think you've ever seen this speech before or heard it before I just said we're going to talk about it. But I know you have watched it at this point. What were your kind of high level thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. I love the way he starts it out. If you and I recommend everybody to go watch it. I'm kind of curious, Chris. Would you recommend them go watch it before the podcast or after the podcast?
Ooh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to link it below. What I want you to
Okay.
do if you are listening is if it's easy, if you're not on a walk, just keep on listening to this. If you have the chance though, pause this podcast, go listen to it, and then hear our interpretation because you can listen to this speech over and over and over again and get different things. There's an old quote from the Stoics that you never step into the same river twice. And that's because the river constantly changes, but more importantly, you change. So every time that I go back to this speech, I hear something new, something I never caught. Maybe if you listen to it, you'll get something different than Dominic and I are going to discuss today, since we're only talking about it from the standpoint of financial independence. But this speech could be its own course.
It really could. It really could. And I love the way I always believe in when you have a speech, right? It's always great to start off with a little bit of humor, right? If the humor doesn't hit, well, we're in for a long speech. But thankfully, he starts it off with a little bit of a joke where there's two fish swimming in a river, right? And an old fish swims by and he's like, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the younger fish are like, "What is water?" And to me, that was pretty funny. Maybe I have a very dry, ironically dry sense of humor, but it kind of goes to show it's like, well, you don't know what you're in. You don't know what is sometimes. You don't know the habits and the routines. And here at the Fi Guys, I mean, we're all about routines. We're all about habits, right? Because what you do is, the habits you do are basically what you become, and what you become is who you are. So it's very important to very much pay attention to everything that's around you. But oftentimes in this busy life we're in, well, we kind of get caught up and we don't realize the habits that we're in and the patterns and all these different things that are surrounding us that are molding us into the person that society wishes us to be in without knowing. So today's podcast is going to be about discovering what we are missing, discovering what we aren't seeing, and really starting to kind of train our mind to see what hasn't been seen before.
And with that, I want to bring up one of the quotes from the speech directly. And it's where the author, David Foster Wallace, I'm just going to call him Wallace from here on out, says, "The most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about." And just like Dominic said with the parable of fish and water, just like fish can't see the water that they're in, most of us can't see the invisible scripts around money, work, consumption, and success that shape every choice that we make on a daily context. I want to challenge our listeners in today's podcast to just think about this. What if financial independence isn't just about math, but about noticing the water we're swimming in every day?
That's an interesting takeaway. And while you were thinking about it, I had a thought that I wonder how many people are more awake than they think they are, right? I know for us, today's episode is about, unplugging from the matrix a little bit, seeing the world around you, understanding that this is the way that people want you to go, society wants you to go, right? And then you kind of break that bind, right? Break those chains. But there's also a large portion of the population that understand that those chains are in place and are fine with it. Even in and this is crazy to think about, but even in slave times in our country, there were people who didn't want to break free out of fear. And that translates very well to where we are in today's society because a lot of it, a lot of today's society is controlled by fear, whether that's fear from your bosses, your coworkers being judged or being fired, or from your family, your friends being ostracized, being cut out, excommunicated, right? And a lot of the fear comes from within. And kind of what I've gotten, the more time I kind of spend thinking about this commencement speech, like you said, Chris, once you step into the river once and you go back to step in it again, you're not the same man and you're not the same river. But as I'm kind of thinking about it more and more, it's becoming more and more apparent to me that, we all make choices in life. And like, I'm going to drop a Fast and Furious quote on you, Tokyo Drift. But as Hans said, life is simple. We make choices and we don't look back. And that's kind of how I've had to live my life a little bit because we've all made mistakes, right? But understanding and noticing where society is trying to push us is the ultimate flex on society. That means we can navigate the current a little bit better. So Chris, how do we, before even learning how to navigate the current, how do we even discover that we're in a current?
In order to discover that you're in a current, I think first you need to be able to wake up. You need to discover that you're kind of running on what I'm going to call it's actually, let's bring it back to what David Foster Wallace talks about. The speech, the entire part of This Is Water is really about bringing awareness and choice, recognizing that we are all born with a default setting. And we all have the propensity to be in that default setting through our entire life. And that default setting can probably be really well surmised as self-centered thinking, that I am the center of the universe. And I know we don't talk about this very often in culture, but if you really think about it, listener, Dominic, myself, every single thing has ever happened shows me that I am the center of the universe. Everything that happens from me talking right now is happening to me. Dominic, you are in front of me. Things that happen behind me, to the left of me, to the right of me. And it's not until we realize that the true freedom is the ability to consciously decide what has meaning and how I choose to assign meaning to the things that happen. I call it your frame of reference. That we all have this frame of reference that we're stuck in, but too many of us are stuck in the default setting of believing whatever happens is happening to me and only me, because I am clearly the center of the universe. And until you're able to break out of that and realize that no one here is the center, we're all collectively the center, you're going to be stuck in that default setting and life is going to kick you in the ass over and over again.
There's this quote that if you're watching the podcast, you might have seen me look down at my notes and look back up. I'm like, oh, what's the quote? And I had to look it up. But there's this quote that I heard many years ago that I really enjoyed. And it said, I allow manipulation to find out where my enemy wants me to go. Then I use my mind to break the trap and punish the perpetrators. If we don't know where the traps are, that can be a very tumultuous road to go down. But to be prepared for the traps is a whole nother superpower. I don't know how much we can prepare for life and the troubles that it, throws our way, but at least we can start to set up a mental framework that serves us in any situation. But like you said, Chris, I mean, first we have to be awake. First we have to unplug. And I swear this podcast is getting more and more matrixy. I can feel like Neo, like pulling the cord out of the back head, right? But
Well, let's talk about that. So
okay.
let's talk about that default setting. For people that are on their default setting, they're just kind of going through life, allowing it, and then you're stuck. You're a fish in the water, and the tide is going. If you don't start to break free, you don't start to wake up, then society's default settings will eventually become your default settings. And as we know, we live in a capitalist society, and I love that we live in a capitalist society because it's the best of all the bad situations, in my estimation, until we get too far, until we get to basically the point that we are right now. And what are the default settings of our culture? And if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you're in a culture that has the exact same ethos that we do, which is earn, spend, repeat. Earn, spend, repeat. We do this our whole life. And we rarely question the why behind our careers or our spending habits or why we do what we do. And again, that's going back to the default setting. That might be even worse than being in your own default setting. Now you're farming out your default setting, how you're going to live your life, to a society, to a culture. Rather than saying, hey, what do I want to do with my life? You ask the entire world, what should I do with my life? And we're all stuck in this current without realizing that we're in it. And everyone else is in the exact same current with us, going to work, 9 to 5, angry, upset, repeating it, doing it again, buying things to make their life a little bit better. And then by purchasing that thing to be finally happy about what they have to do every single day, it ties them stronger to the job in order to pay for that thing so that they can escape their mundane life. Until we're able to wake up for a second and say, do I really want this? What is the most important things to me? And to take some of that self-centeredness that we all have and say, is this self-centeredness can be a good thing? How can I use it as a tool to help me escape and be self-centered in the way that now I can give back to other people? The same way that you and I, Dominic, that we do. Not to say that we're freaking amazing, because we're definitely not. We're just people. But the reason that we do this podcast is because we want to help people wake up. We want people to be able to escape this matrix through our method of teaching them about personal finance. And it's just one of the methods, but there's a bunch of other ones. But in my estimation, it's the biggest thing that I've seen hold people back. And one of the few things that I think that we both have a unique perspective to be able to change people. What do you think?
Same.
You know?
No, you know, I'm a guy that's full of quotes, right? I live my life based on quotes, and I use quotes to help direct my life. And recently I had a bit of an epiphany where it's like, man, when I was fresh out of college, and I had what they would say, like, they had the light in their eyes, like I had so much light in my eyes, and it's like, man, I was doing this, I was doing that. I was like, to me, I was like thinking about when was I peaking? Like, when was I at like my most powerful, my most creatively powerful? When was life the best? And when I was fresh out of college, I didn't know if my internship was going to get me a job. And a lot of my decisions I made were based out of fear, unknowingly. But looking back, they were made out of fear, right? When COVID hit and that job laid me off, a lot of my decisions were based off fear, right? Society, to me, has always been pushing people in one way or another. And I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's like a hive mentality or like, a flock of sheep. Um, I don't know why. I don't know why we don't accept paths that are different a little bit more. Maybe because the people we love don't want to see us fail. But to be honest, I mean, Chris, you and I know this, and the viewer, I mean, I'm sure you might know this as well, but failure is a great thing. Failure means you tried. Failure means that, hey, there's a lot of data rich knowledge in there, but if you can crack open the failure and learn from it, well, you can be better. But you should always want to fail. You should always strive to fail and understand that failure is not the enemy. And to me, man's greatest enemy is not death, right? But it's the slow death of becoming what society tells you you should be.
I agree with that. I want to, we'll definitely talk about that here a little bit more, but I want to bring back some of the key takeaways and link the speech, This is Water, which hopefully at this point our listener has had the chance to listen to so that we can talk a little bit more about it. But if you haven't, you can listen to it after we talk about it. And I want to link that speech to financial independence. I think the first thing that we have to do when we listen to that speech and we think about financial independence is notice the water that we currently swim in. Money beliefs are absorbed unconsciously. Your family habits, your culture, social media creates your frame of reference. And from what I've seen, and this is from just my own interpretation of everything that I've noticed, your money beliefs are formed usually in childhood. And from what I've seen in the data, it's usually by the age of 7 years old. You already have your money beliefs formed. And the journey to financial independence, to this entire life journey, is noticing those scripts, noticing those things that you take as water, noticing the things that you believe are undoubtedly true without even assuming or even questioning if they are or not. And you really need to ask yourself, is this what I really value? Is this truth that I believe is self-evident? Is that actually true? Because if you can't question that, then you're never going to be able to grow. You're never going to be able to look and see, is there even a better way at all? It's kind of like you need to get from point A to point B. And you've always known, like, hey, if I need to get from point A to point B, I take these road, this road, this road, this road. And like, that's the only way to get there. And then Google Maps comes out. And Google Maps says, actually, hey, there's this other way you can go. It's way faster. There's no lights, all this stuff. You're like, wow, I didn't even know there was that way to do that. It was on the map the entire time. I just never looked at it because I never questioned to say, is there a better way? Because I knew 100% that this is the only way. And then when other people would try to even bring up to me, hey, you can try it this way, I got upset with them because now you're challenging the way that I see the world, my frame of reference, my values, me as a human being. That's the interpretation that happens automatically and so quickly that you believe that you're correct. Because if you were to give in and say, like, oh, you're right too, that doesn't just mean that I was wrong here. It means that I am wrong as a person, that I am not enough somehow. And that's where you'll see people get so upset by being questioned or just asked a little bit more of a why, because they don't really know. And they can't even begin to ask themselves. And then you need to be okay with being okay with that and realizing that that's a them problem, not a you problem. Before we get on to the next one, Dominic, what do you think?
Well, when you were speaking, it reminded me of the Bruce Lee quote of, that be like water. Ironically, right? Be like water, shapeless, formless. You put water in a cup, becomes the cup, right? And what you're saying really resonated with me because you're so right. When you try and challenge someone on their beliefs and you find holes in their argument and you come up with very logical and practical, you know, debates on their topics, it's like backing a lion into a corner. It's like, I'm about to attack. I'm about to go crazy on you. And I understand where childhood, right? Most of our financial beliefs come from, but I feel like the beliefs that we believe, maybe politically, are ever changing as you grow up, right? Maybe that might be more like teenage years, young adult years, right? And then for like a good period of time, right? Maybe 20 years. And then it changes again once you get older for some reason. Um, but one of the things that's kind of interesting to me is that most people don't even know where their beliefs come from. They haven't challenged why they think the way they think, yet they believe what they think is the only way and the correct way. And I guess what I'm starting to more what I'm starting to realize is you'll never meet a more foolish person who's dumb, but who thinks they're smart because they don't know enough. It's like the bell curve we talk about all the time on the podcast, right? When you're young, you think you know it all, right? But as you learn a little bit more, you start to realize how much you don't know. And it's tough to ask the questions you don't even know to ask.
Mhm.
And that's the scary part about becoming more awake is the more you see, the more you realize you don't know. And the more you don't know, well, if you're not careful and you don't put it through the right lens, well, you could start building a life that's very stressful, very chaotic. It's like, oh, I don't know what could happen. I don't know. It's like you could start leading a life of fear, but I still think it's worth it to
Yeah.
become
And
awake.
I would say that majority of people are stuck in that because that is all of our default settings.
Yeah.
Every one of us come into this world with this default setting of I am the center of the universe. This is the way things are. If it happens to me, it is because it's about me. The way that I think about it comes to me so automatically, so real, so vivid. And for you to be able to explain the way that you view things, you have to tell me that. You have to express to me, and I have to hear it and interpret it through my lens. But the way that I feel and think comes so quickly and so automatically that it must be true. And if we're stuck in that all the time, we have no ability to choose meaning. And let's bring this back to financial independence just for a second, because I think too many people, they think that financial independence is about having a big savings rate, when in truth, it's about the freedom to define what success actually means to you. Because too many people, if you get stuck in the default setting, you think you're also going to get stuck in society's default setting, saying that success is the bigger car, the bigger house, more money. When in truth, the one thing that we have the ability to do is to choose meaning. You get to work because you want to, not because you have to. You get to choose what goals you're going after personally, but that means you have to escape the default setting. You have to question enough to be able to get out of it. And that is fearful. And that's why when I see so many people who are stuck in default mode, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. The exact same thing when you get a product, you take it out of the box and it's set into default mode. You're just like, okay, I'm not going to mess with any of these settings because I don't want to mess it up. Like the system came this way for a reason. And if I start to change things, yeah, maybe it'll sound a little bit better, maybe better, but I don't know what I'm doing here. And it's going to be scary and I don't know how to fix it. And that's why I think that most people will go through life staying on the default setting. And that might be the easier mode to go through life believing that you're the center of the universe, whatever you think is true. Everything is happening to me and it's about me. Because I'm sure we've all met people who go through life. You've met people at school, at work, whatever, who all believe that they're the center of the world. When you try bringing up your things, they say, I need to tell you about my thing.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
called a main character syndrome. I don't know if
yes.
you've ever seen. I'm sure people have seen videos. I'm sure you've seen videos on it where it's like someone's just on the highway and they're just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna cut across like 4 lanes." Like y'all are just side characters. You're wannabes. You're not real main characters like me. And then they just 4 lanes of traffic, or they just do strange things, right? And it's so bizarre that we've allowed this to kind of happen in society. And this is like the one time, maybe not the one time, but this is like one of those times where you need to like take someone and be like, "Hey, listen, I don't mean to break you down, but you're not the center of the universe, right? We're not creating this podcast for Debbie in Alaska because she's the center of the universe. Like that's not. I'm sorry, Debbie. Big shout out, but I'm sure there's like a thousand Debbies in Alaska if I'm being honest. But there's no. That's not how it works, right? And it's funny. Do you think do you think everybody goes through that, Chris? And just like there's like a small 0.01% of people who never grow out of it? Because I believed I was the center of the universe once when I was like 5, 6, you know?
Dom, I would say it's scary. I don't know how many people get out of it, but I would say it's probably a majority of people don't get out of it.
You think a majority of people don't get out of it?
Yeah. I mean, a majority in terms of like, yeah, I would probably say probably about 50, 49% of people. stay stuck in this frame of reference. And I think this is the scary part. This is the more pernicious part about it, is that you can get out of it in certain regards,
Mhm.
but then be stuck in it in other regards. Like maybe at work, you realize, oh, I'm not the most important person here at work, but in my family, I'm the most important person. And that's the scariest part, is when you can't see the way broadly to realize like, oh, we're all a collective. We're all here together. I'm not the center of it in any of these regards. Even when it's about me, it's really not about me.
Yeah.
So that's why I say that majority of people are probably I think we're all stuck in it. I don't think there's any way, because we all believe that we are the individual self. And I think that's where all of our woes come from. Right now, I'm reading this book called The Myth of Normal. And in the book, the author talks about how everything that we nowadays perceive as normal. Oh, I'm an individual. I go to work. I support my family, only me. We only focus on us. How abnormal that is in human history. Like that's completely abnormal. We were a collective. For pretty much all of human history, you had to be, or you did not make it. And now we're in this new society, this new way, and people are so disconnected from each other and disconnected from themselves because we're all afraid. We're all scared because we're alone. And we're alone because the default settings of our society has put us there. And now we need to go ahead and move forward and try to redefine what this freedom means. Does freedom mean that I don't have to talk to anybody else, that I get to be afraid that I have to do all this thing? Or can freedom mean something different? Can freedom mean awareness? From financial independence, can freedom mean options rather than what we believe it to be?
Because normal isn't always the same as healthy. And that's one of the things that society might push you to a place where it wants you to go. But society doesn't have your best interest in mind, right?
It's
I mean,
normal to
even
be
your parents.
obese. It's
Yeah.
normal to not work out. It's
Yeah.
normal to go to work for 10 hours or for 8 hours a day, commute an hour both ways, to be upset all the time. That is normal. It's normal at this point to be depressed.
Yeah. You don't want to be normal. Normal sucks. From my perspective, from what I want out of life, normal kind of sucks. It does. It sucks. It's not, the average is not fun. Normal sucks. Society, don't be like society.
Yeah. Because
Be the
how many
norm.
times have you looked at other people as walking around and you're like, oh, look at this droll NPC. Like, how could you even exist being that way? And they think the exact same thing of you.
Yeah.
And we're all
Yeah.
going through this. And now you're saying, I want to be that. It requires rejecting autopilot. It requires the ability to live with intention. Every day I go into my gym and I have a poster of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it says, the worst thing I can be is just like everybody else. And I look at that every single day as I do my squats or as I work out. It's like right there. And so many of us, we go through life trying to be accepted by other people, to be part of the tribe, because we are alone. We all feel this, majority of us feel this irk of like, society wants me to be alone, to go into the jungle. So I try to find my tribe. And the way that you find your tribe is by trying to fit in with everybody else. But if everybody else is unhealthy, not doing great because society is pushing that way, and you just kind of go with those tides, you're going to get stuck there too. And you're going to look back in 20, 30 years and realize at the time that they put you in the ground that you never really lived at all.
So, in Wallace's eyes, what was freedom? Or what is freedom in Wallace's eyes?
I can't put words into his mouth. I don't know what freedom would be for him. Unfortunately, he ended up committing suicide. I don't know if you know how the story ends.
I did not know about that. Wow.
He struggled just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
But I would say if I had to put something in it, I would just have to take it from the speech. It's the ability to choose, the ability to wake up, to realize that your default settings are just settings. They're not truth. And to take this back to like financial independence, we need to be able to avoid the tides that we're getting pushed on. And we always talk about here on the podcast about the hedonic treadmill, that consumer culture, we've now as Americans exported that to the entire rest of the world. And now that is our invisible current. Well, we have the ability, if we find financial independence, we we take in the math, we absorb the math and say like, yeah, the math is true. Like I can get the math, that's factual. But financial independence, it's about the exit from the current consciousness. It's about getting away from the way that things are and trying to see what things could be if I was actually in charge of my life, if I align my spending with my values, not comparison to everybody else, not be normal. Because what is normal is insane. What is normal is going to school, being $200,000 in debt, working for a company for 40 years so that you can live your golden years where at that time you have no energy, no ability, no mobility to be able to live the life that you ever wanted, and then to get planted in the ground 20 years later and look back on your entire time. And then we talk about now we're moving on to the 5 regrets of the dying. And you realize that you never actually lived because you were on default the entire time. You were surviving rather than thriving. We want people to be able to hear these words and just be like, oh my God, I am too. I'm stuck in this too. And how can I start to get out? And I would say the first step is awareness. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Like we can't fix the problem until you admit that there's a problem. Tough. It's tough.
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, it's definitely tough. It's tough when you realize that so many people that you love just drifted through life. You know, my dad, he's lived a full life and he's still alive, thankfully. But, you know, he told me this a few years ago and it kind of stuck with me. But he said, you know, son, life is going to pass you by really quickly. Like yesterday, I graduated high school. Yesterday, I moved to Arizona. Yesterday, you know, I met your mother, right? Yesterday, all this. And now I'm 66. And it's important that we really take in every moment. You know, I was at work yesterday, and I was like, I was in that like mode of like, how did I even get here? Like, what just like what steps of autopilot of not being aware got me to this exact spot? I know how to do this. I know how to increase my savings rate. I know how to increase my income. I know how to increase, you know, all these different things. I know how to become stronger. Not so I'm like, so why am I where I am? And I'm where I am because this is where the current kind of pushed me a little bit, and I allowed it to push me. And I'm starting to reawaken. And I don't know. You know, it's funny, right? The mind and life and are so similar in the fact that you can sharpen a sword, right? But it gets dull over time. And just because, you know, we listen to this podcast, we listen to this speech, and we have an epiphany about life, and we're kind of sold on the idea that, well, life is trying to guide me this way, but I must break through. It's like we oftentimes get motivated by it and then we forget about it. And then life does what it always does and it molds you.
And I think that's the challenge of life, right? That your brain wants to move back into the default setting. Yeah. And for moments, you wake up and then you're like, oh my gosh. And you see through the matrix. You're like, I see the code. I get it. And then you forget that you saw the code. You know, and that's from my studying of Buddhism, like that's what enlightenment is. It's not that you've enlightened and now you're there and you see the code forever. It's that you woke up for a moment. And the goal should be to wake up for longer. Be conscious of why you do what you do for longer. For our listeners, I want to start to introduce a framework that Dominic and I kind of created to implement in your lives in order to create this kind of concept of how can we become more aware. And I think that step 1 comes with an awareness audit. Because if you're not aware, there's nothing, I can't even, you're not even listening to this podcast, quite frankly. You're just like, this doesn't make sense and you're out. And I get that. But if you are aware and you're still listening with us, I want you to spend a week noticing your automatic money thoughts and habits. If you want to take this outside of the realm of financial independence and get this away from the 5 guys, I want you to notice your thoughts and your habits in general. But since we are the Five Guys, we're going to talk about your money habits. And I want you to journal when you buy something, ask yourself why. Why when I was at work and I was upset that I decided, you know what I need to do? I need to go buy a soda. I need to go spend some money on lunch today. I brought lunch, but now I'm upset. I'm going to go buy a $15 burger. Ask yourself those questions because that at least gives you some awareness. And without that awareness, without admitting that there might be a problem, we're never going to be able to make progress on said problems. Before we go on to step 2, Dominic, what do you think about the awareness audit or just becoming aware in general?
And, the first step is always the hardest. It's like you said, it's like you have to admit there's a problem before you can address the problem. How do you wake someone up? Most people aren't ready to be woken up, Um, they have to choose it. But sometimes that takes a lifetime. And that's what we're trying to avoid. I don't know how you wake people up. I
Uh,
don't know.
I don't think you can.
I don't think you
Again,
can.
we talked about this off the podcast, but I think all you can do is be there ready when they are ready to wake up, to show them the path that you were walking yourself, and then them look at you and be like, how did you do that? And when they're ready to come, you have hands open and you're like, I will teach you. I will teach you how I got on my path, but I can't be on your path because I'm on mine. But it starts with that awareness. After you maybe built up that week of awareness, you're starting to think about why you do what you do. Think about your thinking. Like that's what gives us the ability. It's metacognition, that we can think about our thinking. It's probably the one thing that makes us the apex predator, is that we have that ability. I want you to do step 2, and that's a values inventory. So I want you, and this is hard. This is not easy to do, but I want you to list the top 3 things in life that makes life meaningful to you. That might be, for me, I'll tell you mine, that don't steal mine, but there's relationship, creativity, service.
Yeah.
Those are my things. You need to find out what they are for you. And then I want you to compare your spending that you just did the week prior with those things that bring you meaning. Are they in line? Because if they're not, there's a good chance that you are running on default settings in this part of your life. And you have the ability to break it. And remember, if you want to take this and take it all broadly, you can do that. And don't just apply this to your finances, apply this to everything that you do. Because if you're the person who says, oh, relationships are the most important thing, my family is the most important thing to me, and then you audit your time and you realize that even on the weekends when you have the chance to spend with them, you'd rather just sit on your phone and scroll, I'm going to challenge you and say that you're lying. You're deluding yourself. You're on default mode and you've lied to yourself and you're never going to be able to escape it. You're probably not going to listen to the podcast at this point because you're not going to be able to escape it because you don't admit that there's a problem. Step 3, I want you to build your financial freedom number. And we've talked about this through all the 5 crash course, being able to understand how to calculate the 4% rule, being able to how to calculate your expenses. But you need to know what your expenses are so you can know how I maintain a life centered around my values. Not a life that someone else chose for me, not the life that society chose for me, but the life that I have chosen for myself based off of my awareness, my values, what's important to me. And once you have that number, and again, I'm going to tell you real quick, 25 times your annual income. It's not the number. It's not the definitive number, but it is a good place to start. I'm sorry. Did I say annual income? I meant annual expenses.
Yeah.
25 times your annual expenses. It's not like, okay, I hit that. If I spend $40,000 a year, I have $1 million invested. Now I get to walk into my offices, flip the desk and leave. That's not what that means. But at least it gives you a trajectory. It gives you a rough compass point to start walking in that way. Because if not, what most people do is they think, I need $15 million, $20 million, $60 million. And then it's so monstrous of a task, they don't even begin starting. Because most financial advice is given to the general masses. But you are not part of the general masses. That's what we're trying to wake you up to be. You are an individual. And the most important thing on your journey to financial independence is your spending rate, your expenses rate. That's going to be your biggest driver and your biggest pullback. Step 4, I want you to start to design intentional habits. And we've talked about this every single time on the FI guys. If you haven't listened to the FI crash course, go start back at episode 110. But that means you need to automate your savings and your investments so you don't drift back into the default settings. Because the default settings tells you not to do that. The default settings says live right here, right now. Because there's been a lot of research that shows that our brains, when we think about our future self, we think about that person the same way we think about some random person that we've never met. And the scary part is one day you want to be a good past self. You want to be a good ancestor to future you because you are the exact same person, just in a different time and space. But too many of us, our default setting is get yours right now because tomorrow is not guaranteed. And that is true. Tomorrow is not guaranteed, but statistically, you will get to tomorrow. And if you don't do anything about that today, tomorrow you is going to look back on the decisions you make today and be pretty damn pissed off with you. So do today what others won't so that tomorrow you can do what others can't. And step number 5, and this is the biggest one, and this is the hardest one because our default setting wants us to go back to default mode every day. You need to practice daily choices. In every decision, every day, work, purchases, time, you need to pause and ask yourself, what am I worshiping right now? Status or meaning? Because in life, we are all worshiping something, regardless if it's Christian God, Buddha, Allah, whatever. If you're an atheist, you are worshiping something. And you need to choose to worship the right things, the things that are aligned with your values individually. There is no right way. There is just the way. And that's our 5 steps. Dominic, before we get onto our action step, do you have anything else you want to talk about? Or do you want to bring it up on 5 Friday feedback?
I got some stuff to bring up on 5 Friday feedback. So that, for those that don't know, that is our Friday episode where we recap Monday's episode. We also do a viewer mailbag. Someone from the community writes in and we kind of help them out. But yeah, I'm going to save my 2 cents for Friday's episode. That way we have some good stuff to talk about. But I highly recommend you guys go and listen to the actual speech, right? It's 22 minutes. It's not too long, right? If you're Chris, that's about 8 minutes on 4x speed. That's really quick. It's a really short speed, really short thing. But for those that don't know, Chris's superpowers listening to this stuff like really fast, like Alvin and the Chipmunk level fast. It's so freaking cool. But yeah, let's get on to our action step and then we'll do some closing reflections.
Yeah. So the action step would be ideally that you do the 5-step framework we just did, but obviously you can't do that in 1 week because it takes some time, but you can get started. So I encourage our listeners to share one visible script that they noticed this week about money or about anything in life. What invisible script did they have that they took as truth that they realized like, oh, that's not actually true or might not necessarily be true. Share it in the comments. Let us know. Write us at the FiGuysVideoPodcast.com. Go to the Fi Guys website. Put it in the feedback tab. We would love to hear it. And then I suggest a challenge. 7 days of noticing the water in your financial life. I want to end with David Foster Wallace's reminder. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline. I'm going to tie that back to financial independence because financial independence isn't just about retiring early. It's about learning to see the water that we're already in so that you can decide every day what you truly want your money and your life to mean because you assign your life's meaning. Dom, will you close this out?
I love it. Well, guys, this is the Fi Guys podcast. I'm Dom. He's Chris. We'll see you guys back here on Friday. If you enjoyed today's episode, which I assume you did, you're still here. Make sure to give it a like and share it with a friend. Share it any way you can. We would really appreciate that. But till then, I'm Dom. He's Chris. Like I said, for the Fi Guys, see you on Friday. Later, guys.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.